Colorado Territory, 1882. Dust swirled across the weathered boardwalk of Silver Creek as Thomas Eldridge dismounted his chestnut gelding, his eyes narrowed against the harsh afternoon sun. At 25, he had already seen enough of the frontier's cruelty to know one truth: a man survived longer on his own. The less you cared, the less you had to lose when the territory inevitably took everything away. Tom adjusted his worn leather vest and straightened his shoulders before pushing through the swinging doors of the Silver Creek Saloon. 3 years working as a ranch hand at the Diamond Cross had taught him to keep his head down, do his job, and trust no one but himself and his horse. The West had no patience for softness, and neither did he. "Eldridge," a booming voice called from behind the bar. Martin Weber, the saloon owner, waved him over. "Your monthly letter came in yesterday's post." Tom nodded curtly, accepting the envelope from Weber's meaty hand. His sister's elegant script adorned the front, his only remaining family back east. After their parents' deaths from fever 5 years prior, she had married well and settled in Boston, while Tom had headed west, determined to forge a life where emotional attachments couldn't weaken him. The frontier was no place for sentiment, it was a place to survive and nothing more. "Thanks," he muttered, tucking the letter into his vest pocket. He'd read it later, alone. "You hear about Sheriff Lawson?" Weber asked, polishing a glass. "Found dead yesterday morning, bullet to the back." Tom's jaw tightened. He hadn't particularly liked Sheriff Lawson, few did, but the news sent an uncomfortable ripple through him. "Any suspects?" "Nothing solid," Weber replied. "Deputies handling things until they can send someone new. Town meeting tonight about it." Tom had no intention of attending any town meeting. Silver Creek's politics weren't his concern. He ordered a whiskey, downed it quickly, and headed back out into the fading daylight. The Diamond Cross was a 5-mile ride, and Foreman Hank Davis didn't tolerate hands returning after dark. As he mounted his horse, Tom noticed a carriage pulling up to the modest hotel across the street. The door swung open, and a young woman stepped down, her honey-blonde hair gleaming in the late afternoon sun. She wore a dove-gray traveling dress, simple but well-made, suggesting she came from money but didn't flaunt it. Something about the careful way she surveyed the dusty Main Street made him pause. She couldn't be more than 22, but her eyes held a wariness he recognized all too well. Tom shook his head, spurring his horse toward the ranch. Whatever brought a refined young woman to a rough place like Silver Creek was none of his business. Survival meant minding your own affairs. The following morning, Tom rode into town on the foreman's orders to pick up supplies. As he tied his horse outside the general store, he spotted the blonde woman from yesterday speaking with Deputy Harrison on the boardwalk. She gestured emphatically, her posture straight and determined despite the deputy's dismissive stance. "I must insist on seeing Sheriff Lawson's office," she said, her voice carrying across the street. "My business is urgent." "Ma'am, as I've explained, Sheriff Lawson is dead," the deputy replied, clearly losing patience. "And I can't have civilians poking around his office until the new sheriff arrives." "When will that be?" she pressed. "Week, maybe 2. Now if you'll excuse me, I've got actual law enforcement to attend to." The deputy tipped his hat and walked away, leaving the woman standing alone, her hands clenched at her sides. For a moment Tom thought she might cry, but instead she straightened her shoulders and marched toward the hotel. Tom continued with his errand, filling the Diamond Cross's order with Mr. Paulson, the store owner. As he was loading the supplies into his saddlebags, Paulson leaned against the doorframe. "That young lady causing quite a stir," he commented. "Olivia Kincaid, she says her name is. Came all the way from Denver, asking about Sheriff Lawson." Tom grunted noncommittally, securing the last package. "Odd timing, ain't it?" Paulson continued. "Sheriff gets killed, and next day a pretty young thing shows up looking for him. Makes a man wonder." "Not my concern," Tom replied, though he couldn't help glancing toward the hotel where Miss Kincaid had disappeared. "Well, might become everybody's concern. Way Deputy Harrison tells it, she claims she never even met Lawson. So why's she so desperate to get into his office? Suspicious, if you ask me." Tom mounted his horse, nodding farewell to Paulson. As he rode past the sheriff's office, he slowed, noticing the door was ajar. Curiosity, a luxury he rarely indulged, got the better of him. He dismounted, tied his horse, and approached cautiously. Inside, the office was empty but showed signs of a hasty search, drawers partially open, papers scattered. Tom stepped further in, scanning the disheveled room. That's when he saw it, propped against the wall behind the desk. A framed portrait of a woman. Even with the layer of dust covering the glass, there was no mistaking the honey-blonde hair and composed features of Olivia Kincaid. Tom picked up the portrait, wiping the dust away with his sleeve. The painting showed her seated in a garden, wearing a blue dress, her expression serious but with a hint of gentleness around her eyes. Why would Sheriff Lawson, a notorious drunkard and bully, have a portrait of this refined young woman? A floorboard creaked behind him. Tom turned sharply to find Miss Kincaid herself standing in the doorway, her eyes wide with shock. "What are you doing with that?" she demanded, stepping forward to snatch the portrait from his hands. "I could ask you the same about being in here," Tom replied. "Deputy made it clear this office is off limits." The deputy stepped out, her gaze fell to the portrait, her fingers tracing the frame. "So it is true, he had it all this time." "Who had what?" "Look, miss, I don't know what's going on, but finding your portrait in a dead sheriff's office seems mighty strange when you claim never to have met him." Her eyes flashed up to meet his. "I never have met him, that's the truth." "But this portrait," she hesitated, "it was stolen from my father's house in Denver 3 years ago along with other valuables. How Sheriff Lawson came to possess it, I cannot say." Tom studied her, trying to determine if she was lying. Her steady gaze didn't waver, but there was something she wasn't saying. "Miss Kincaid, I don't mean to pry, but—" "Then don't," she interrupted. "This is a private matter. One I intend to resolve quickly and quietly before returning to Denver." A commotion outside drew their attention. Deputy Harrison's voice carried through the open door. "We need to leave," Tom said, moving toward the back exit. "Unless you want to explain to the deputy why we're both here." Olivia hesitated, clutching the portrait to her chest. "Now, Miss Kincaid," Tom insisted, holding out his hand. She took it, allowing him to guide her through the back door moments before the deputy entered. They slipped down the alley behind the buildings, emerging on a side street where Tom's horse waited. "I need to return to my hotel," Olivia said, attempting to withdraw her hand. Tom didn't release it. "Deputy will check there first. Come with me, I'll bring you back when it's safe." Against his better judgment, Tom helped her onto his horse and mounted behind her. As they rode out of town toward the Diamond Cross, the portrait secured in his saddlebag, Tom wondered what he was getting himself into. Survival meant staying out of other people's troubles, yet here he was, aiding a stranger in what was clearly more than a simple case of recovering stolen property. The Diamond Cross spread across 500 acres of Colorado grassland, its main house and bunkhouse nestled against a backdrop of distant mountains. Tom bypassed both, heading instead for a small cabin near the creek where he sometimes went to read his sister's letters in privacy. Few of the other hands knew about it. "We can wait here until evening," he explained, helping Olivia down. "Then I'll take you back to town." Inside the weathered cabin, Olivia placed her portrait on the rough wooden table, studying it with an expression Tom couldn't read. "Why is this painting so important?" he asked, lighting the cabin's single oil lamp. "Important enough to travel alone to a frontier town and risk breaking into a sheriff's office." Olivia sank onto a wooden chair, her composed demeanor faltering for the first time. "It's not just the painting. Though I am glad to recover it, my mother commissioned it before she died." Tom leaned against the wall, waiting. His instinct told him to stop asking questions, to remain uninvolved, but something about her drew him in against his will. "3 years ago," she continued, "our home in Denver was robbed while my father and I attended a social function. Valuables were taken, including this portrait. 2 days later, my father received a letter demanding $5,000 for the return of certain documents that were also stolen." "Blackmail," Tom concluded. Olivia nodded. "My father refused to pay. He claimed the documents were business papers, nothing more, but he was changed after that, nervous, drinking heavily. 6 months later, he shot himself." Tom's chest tightened with unexpected sympathy. "I'm sorry." "After the funeral, I found correspondence suggesting the blackmailer was a lawman from a small town called Silver Creek. I've spent the past year settling my father's affairs and gathering the courage to come here. When I arrived and learned Sheriff Lawson had just been murdered," she looked up at Tom, "I need to know what was in those documents. I need to understand what drove my father to take his own life." The raw determination in her eyes resonated with something deep inside Tom. He recognized the need to make sense of loss, to find answers where often there were none. "How do you fit into this?" she asked suddenly. "Why were you in the sheriff's office?" Tom hesitated, curiosity. The door was open, and after what I'd overheard in town about you looking for Lawson, I wanted to see for myself." Olivia stood, smoothing her skirts. "Well, Mr. Eldridge, Thomas Eldridge." Mr. Eldridge, I appreciate your assistance in retrieving my portrait, but this is my burden to bear. I'll trouble you no further. Tom stepped away from the door she was clearly intending to exit, despite being miles from town. Miss Kincaid, whatever you're planning, doing it alone is foolish. If Lawson was blackmailing your father and now Lawson's been killed, there could be more to this than you realize. Are you offering to help me, Mr. Eldridge, a man who moments ago couldn't wait to mind his own business? Her tone was challenging, but there was a flicker of hope in her eyes that Tom couldn't bring himself to extinguish. Against every instinct he'd cultivated over 3 years of deliberate isolation, Tom nodded. Until you're safely back in Denver, at least. The genuine smile that broke across her face startled him with its warmth. It had been a long time since anyone had looked at him with such open gratitude, and longer still since he'd allowed himself to notice. As the afternoon faded into evening, Tom and Olivia formed a tentative plan. They would return to town after dark, with Tom escorting her to her hotel room. The next day they would begin searching for the missing documents, starting with a more thorough investigation of Lawson's office and home. When they returned to Silver Creek, the town was buzzing with news. A new sheriff would be arriving on tomorrow's stage from Denver. The appointment had come unusually quickly, raising suspicions among the locals about who might have pulled strings to expedite the process. This complicates things, Tom told Olivia as they stood in the shadows beside her hotel. Once the new sheriff takes over, getting access to Lawson's effects will be nearly impossible. Then we must act tonight, Olivia declared, her determined expression visible even in the dim light from the hotel windows. Tom shook his head. Too risky. The deputy has likely doubled his patrols after finding the office disturbed. We'll go at first light before the stage arrives. Meet me behind the livery stable at dawn. Olivia agreed reluctantly, and Tom watched her enter the hotel before making his way to the saloon where he rented a room when staying in town. Sleep eluded him that night, his thoughts circling around Olivia Kincaid and the dangerous path they were treading together. He had spent years avoiding entanglements, focusing solely on surviving day to day. Now he found himself willingly stepping into someone else's trouble, risking his job and possibly his life for a woman he barely knew. Yet when he closed his eyes, he saw her face, not as it appeared in the portrait, composed and formal, but as it had looked in the cabin when she spoke of her father, vulnerable and fierce all at once. Something about her courage in the face of grief resonated with him, reminding him of the person he had once been, before loss had hardened him. At dawn, Tom found Olivia already waiting behind the livery, dressed in a practical navy blue dress with her hair neatly pinned beneath a simple hat. She carried a small leather satchel and wore an expression of quiet determination. "You came," she said, sounding faintly surprised. "I said I would." Tom offered his arm, which she took after only a moment's hesitation. "Sheriff's house is on the edge of town. We'll say we're taking a morning constitutional if anyone asks." They walked briskly through the awakening town, past shopkeepers opening their businesses and ranch hands starting their day with breakfast at the small cafe. Tom nodded to those he knew, projecting an air of casual purpose that seemed to work. No one questioned their presence or destination. Sheriff Lawson's house was a modest cabin set apart from its neighbors, surrounded by a small, neglected yard. The door was secured with a simple padlock, which Tom opened with surprising ease. "Do I want to know where you learned to do that?" Olivia asked as they slipped inside. "Probably not," Tom admitted, closing the door behind them. "Let's be quick." The interior revealed Lawson's solitary existence, sparse furniture, unwashed dishes, and bottles of whiskey in various states of emptiness. They began searching methodically, Tom taking the main room while Olivia examined the bedroom. "Mr. Eldridge," she called softly after several minutes, "I think I've found something." Tom joined her in the small bedroom where she knelt beside a loose floorboard. Beneath it lay a metal strongbox. "It's locked," Olivia said, frustration evident in her voice. Tom studied the lock. "This one I can't pick. We'll need the key." They searched the room thoroughly, finding nothing. As they moved back to the main room, the sound of approaching horses made them freeze. "Someone's coming," Tom whispered, peering through the grimy window. "Two riders, the deputy and someone I don't recognize." Olivia's face paled. "What do we do?" Tom quickly scanned the room, his gaze landing on the back window. "This way." They slipped out just as the riders dismounted in front. Tom led Olivia through the backyard and into a narrow alley between properties. They didn't stop until they reached the livery stable, both breathing hard from the sprint. "The strongbox," Olivia said between breaths. "We need to get it." We will, Tom assured her, but not now. Deputy's suspicious already. We need to be careful. Olivia's hands twisted the fabric of her skirt. The stage from Denver arrives at noon. Once the new sheriff takes over. I know, Tom ran a hand through his hair, thinking, Lawson must have kept the key on him. If it wasn't in his house, it might be among his personal effects at the office. Which are now being guarded by the deputy, Olivia finished. Not all the time, Tom's mind raced ahead. The town meeting's at 11, everyone will be there including the deputy, that's our chance. Olivia studied him, her expression torn between hope and doubt. Why are you helping me, Mr. Eldridge? You don't know me. The question caught Tom off guard. Why indeed? Every instinct honed through years on the frontier told him to walk away, to protect himself from inevitable disappointment or betrayal. Yet here he stood, planning to commit a crime for a woman whose story he couldn't even verify. I suppose, he said slowly, I know what it's like to need answers. When my parents died, there were things left unsaid, questions I'll never have answered. If I can help you find yours, he shrugged, uncomfortable with the admission. Olivia's gaze softened, she reached out, briefly touching his arm. Thank you, Thomas. The simple gesture and use of his given name affected him more than he cared to admit. He cleared his throat. We should separate until the meeting, less suspicious that way. They arranged to meet behind the sheriff's office at 11, and Tom watched Olivia walk back toward her hotel, her posture straight despite the weight of her mission. For the first time in years, he felt something crack in the careful armor he'd built around himself, a hairline fracture that both terrified and exhilarated him. The town meeting drew nearly everyone in Silver Creek to the small town hall. The stage from Denver had been delayed by a broken wheel, buying Tom and Olivia precious time. They slipped into the sheriff's office through the back entrance, finding it empty as hoped. The deputy must have taken Lawson's personal effects, Tom observed, noting the cleared desk drawers. Where would he put them? Olivia asked, her voice hushed despite the empty building. Tom considered. There's a small storeroom where they keep evidence and seized property. This way. The storeroom door was locked, but this lock yielded to Tom's skills. Inside, they found several boxes labeled with case names and dates. On a high shelf sat a wooden crate marked simply Lawson Personal. Tom retrieved it, setting it on the floor between them. Inside were Lawson's few possessions, a pocket watch, a leather wallet, a small Bible, and glinting at the bottom, a key. This must be it, Olivia whispered, picking it up. It has to be. A noise from the main office froze them both. Someone had entered through the front door. Just checking something before the new sheriff arrives, came the deputy's voice, followed by another man's response that Tom couldn't make out. Tom grabbed the key and pulled Olivia behind a tall cabinet just as the storeroom door opened. Deputy Harrison entered, followed by a well-dressed man Tom didn't recognize. All Lawson's effects are stored here, Harrison was saying. Nothing seems missing or disturbed since we found his body. Excellent, the stranger replied, in the house. Secured as you ordered, though someone's been there, lock was tampered with. The stranger cursed softly. Did they take anything? Hard to tell in that pigsty, but the strongbox was still hidden. Good, we need what's inside. The documents. I know, Harrison interrupted. I'm not stupid, but I still don't understand why you couldn't just come as yourself instead of this whole new sheriff charade. The stranger's voice hardened. Because officially I was never here and Lawson never had those documents. Some things need to remain buried, Harrison. You knew that when you agreed to help. The men's voices faded as they moved back toward the main office. Tom and Olivia remained motionless until they heard the front door close. What just happened? Olivia breathed. I'm not entirely sure, Tom replied, but I think we just discovered that your father wasn't the only one being blackmailed by Lawson. And someone powerful wants those documents badly enough to pose as a lawman. They slipped out the back way, the key securely in Tom's pocket. As they hurried toward the edge of town where Lawson's house stood, Olivia grasped Tom's arm. If they're heading to the town hall to meet the stage, we don't have much time. Tom nodded grimly, then we'd better be quick. This time they entered Lawson's house with greater urgency. Olivia retrieved the strongbox while Tom kept watch. The key fit perfectly, and the lid swung open to reveal several folded documents, a small leather pouch, and beneath them all, a stack of photographs. Olivia reached for a document bearing her father's letterhead. As she read, her face paled. It's worse than I imagined, she whispered. My father wasn't just being blackmailed for money. Lawson had evidence that he was involved in land fraud, falsifying deeds to steal property from homesteaders and reselling it to the railroad. "And these other papers?" Tom asked, picking up another document. "Names, dates, amounts." "A dozen other businessmen and officials involved in the scheme." Olivia looked up at him, her eyes wide. "If this became public, it would ruin everyone involved," Tom finished, "including whoever's posing as the new sheriff." Olivia's hand trembled as she reached for the photographs. They showed various men in compromising situations, drinking with known criminals, exchanging money surreptitiously, entering brothels. The final photograph made her gasp. It showed her father shaking hands with a man whose face was clearly visible, the same well-dressed stranger who had been in the sheriff's office with Deputy Harrison. "I know him," she breathed. "Gerald Westfield. He's a judge in Denver and my father's former business partner." The sound of approaching horses shattered the moment. Tom peered out the window to see Deputy Harrison and Judge Westfield riding hard toward the house. "We need to go." Now Tom grabbed the documents and photographs, stuffing them into Olivia's satchel. They rushed out the back door, but there was no easy escape route. The house stood relatively isolated, with open ground between it and the cover of nearby trees. "We'll have to make a run for it," Tom said, taking Olivia's hand. They had barely made it halfway to the tree line when a shout went up behind them. "Stop right there." The crack of a pistol shot punctuated the command. Tom pulled Olivia behind an old watering trough as another shot kicked up dirt near their feet. "We're pinned down," he muttered, checking that the satchel was secure, "and I'm unarmed." Olivia's eyes darted around, assessing their situation with surprising calm. "The livery stable is closest. If we can reach it, we might find horses." Tom nodded. "I'll draw their fire. When I say go, run for the stable. Don't stop no matter what." "I'm not leaving you," Olivia protested. "You have to. Those documents are the only evidence of what's been happening. They'll kill us both to get them back." Tom met her gaze steadily. "Please, Olivia." Something passed between them in that moment, a connection deeper than their brief acquaintance should have allowed. Olivia nodded once, her jaw set with determination. Tom picked up a rock and threw it hard to the right, drawing a shot from their pursuers. "Go," he shouted, standing to hurl another rock. Olivia ran, clutching the satchel to her chest. Tom continued his distraction, diving from cover to cover as bullets struck around him. He saw Olivia reach the stable doors and disappear inside, relief washing through him even as a bullet grazed his upper arm, tearing his shirt and leaving a burning trail across his skin. Taking advantage of his pursuer's need to reload, Tom made his own dash for the stable. He burst through the doors to find Olivia already saddling a horse. "You're hurt," she said, her eyes widening at the blood on his sleeve. "It's nothing." "We need to move." Tom quickly saddled another horse, his movements efficient despite the pain. "Where will we go? They'll have the roads watched." "I know a place," Olivia said, mounting with practiced ease that surprised him. "My father owned a hunting cabin in the mountains. Few people know of it." They rode out the back of the stable just as Harrison and Westfield entered through the front, their curses fading as Tom and Olivia galloped toward the distant mountains. Only when they were well beyond town limits did they slow their pace to avoid exhausting the horses. "How bad is your arm?" Olivia asked as they followed a narrow trail into increasingly wooded terrain. "Just a graze." "I've had worse." Tom flexed his hand, wincing slightly. "How much further to this cabin?" "About 3 hours' ride. It's remote, that's why my father chose it. He valued his privacy." Tom nodded, scanning their back trail for signs of pursuit. "They'll be following. Westfield can't let those documents become public." "Then we need to make sure they do." Olivia's voice was steel. "For my father and for everyone else they've wronged." They rode in companionable silence, each lost in thought. Tom found himself watching Olivia, the determined set of her shoulders, the way she handled her mount with quiet confidence. She was nothing like the helpless eastern flower he had initially assumed her to be. There was a strength in her that called to something long dormant in himself. The cabin proved to be more substantial than Tom expected, a well-built structure of logs and stone nestled in a small clearing with a view of the valley below. Olivia produced a key from her reticule and unlocked the door, revealing a surprisingly comfortable interior. "My father came here to escape Denver society," she explained, lighting a lamp. "It should be well stocked with provisions." Tom secured the horses in a small lean-to behind the cabin, while Olivia prepared a simple meal from the pantry supplies. As night fell, they sat at the rough wooden table, reviewing the documents they had risked their lives to obtain. These prove everything, Olivia said, spreading out papers that detailed the land fraud scheme. Judge Westfield and my father were partners in this, along with several other prominent men. They falsified land claims, forced legitimate homesteaders out through intimidation or legal maneuvering, then sold the properties to the railroad at inflated prices. And Lawson was their enforcer, Tom added, examining a letter in the sheriff's handwriting that detailed services rendered in removing a family from their homestead. Until he realized he could make more by blackmailing his employers. Olivia's hands trembled as she gathered the papers. My father chose suicide rather than face the consequences of what he'd done. He must have felt so trapped. Tom reached across the table, covering her hand with his. People make mistakes, Olivia, even terrible ones. It doesn't erase the good in them. Do you really believe that? She asked, meeting his eyes. After everything you've seen on the frontier. Tom considered the question seriously. 3 years ago, he would have answered differently. The West had taught him that people were often cruel, selfish, and untrustworthy, but looking at Olivia, who had traveled alone into danger to uncover the truth, no matter how painful, he found his cynicism wavering. I'm starting to, he admitted quietly. The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken understanding. Then Olivia gently withdrew her hand, rising to check his injured arm. We should clean this properly, she said, gathering water and bandages from the cabin's supplies. Infection is dangerous out here. As she tended his wound with gentle efficiency, Tom found himself studying her face in the lamplight. The slight furrow of concentration between her brows, the curve of her cheek, the stray tendril of honey-blonde hair that had escaped her pins. Something shifted in his chest, a warmth he had long denied himself spreading through him. What will you do with the documents? He asked, partly to distract himself from these unsettling feelings. Olivia secured the bandage before answering. Take them to the territorial governor. He's known to be incorruptible, and these papers name every official involved in the scheme. It should be enough to ensure justice. Westfield won't give up easily, Tom warned. He'll guess where we're headed. Then we'll need to be careful. Olivia met his gaze steadily. I know I have no right to ask more of you, Thomas. You've already risked everything to help me. If you wish to leave now, I would understand. Tom shook his head without hesitation. I'm seeing this through, the certainty in his voice surprised even him. We'll leave at first light for the territorial capital. They slept in shifts that night, one always keeping watch while the other rested. Tom took the first watch, sitting by the window with a rifle he'd found mounted above the fireplace. As he gazed into the darkness, he reflected on the strange turn his life had taken in just 2 days. He had spent 3 years deliberately avoiding connections, convinced that isolation was the key to survival in the harsh frontier. Yet in less than 48 hours, Olivia Kincaid had drawn him into her world, awakening feelings he had thought long buried, protectiveness, concern, and something deeper he wasn't yet ready to name. When he woke her for her watch, she rose without complaint, taking the rifle with competent hands. In the pale moonlight filtering through the window, she looked both vulnerable and fierce, a contradiction that increasingly defined her in Tom's mind. Sleep well, Thomas, she said softly. I'll wake you if anything changes. He nodded, settling onto the cabin's single cot. Despite the danger surrounding them, Tom fell asleep more easily than he had in years, comforted by Olivia's steady presence across the room. Dawn brought a new challenge, the distant sound of approaching riders. Tom and Olivia prepared to flee, but a quick reconnaissance revealed at least 4 men surrounding the cabin, with more likely in the woods. They've found us, Tom said grimly, loading the rifle. Must have guessed where we'd go. Olivia's face was pale but determined as she secured the satchel of documents inside her dress. Is there another way out? Tom shook his head. Not without being seen. We're going to have to make a stand. The first shots came moments later, bullets splintering the cabin walls as Harrison's voice called out, "Come out now and you might live." The documents are all we want. Tom returned fire cautiously, conserving their limited ammunition. We need a distraction, he told Olivia, something to give us a chance to break through their line. Olivia's eyes lit with sudden inspiration. The hunting cabin's cellar, my father stored blasting powder there for clearing land. It's through that trapdoor. Tom raised his eyebrows, impressed. That might work. While Tom continued exchanging shots with their attackers, Olivia retrieved several sticks of blasting powder and fuses from the cellar. Together, they formulated a desperate plan. I'll create a diversion on the east side, Tom explained. When you hear the explosion, take your horse and ride west hard as you can toward the territorial capital. And you, Olivia demanded. I won't leave you behind again. I'll be right behind you, Tom promised, though they both recognized the uncertain odds. Olivia gripped his arm. Thomas, if we're separated. She hesitated, then reached into her pocket and pressed her locket into his hand. Find me in Denver, my address is inside. The simple request, the trust and hope it contained, struck Tom deeply. On impulse he leaned forward, pressing his lips to hers in a brief, fierce kiss. I will, he vowed. They prepared quickly, gathering their few possessions and readying the horses at the back door. Tom set the charges along the east wall of the cabin, positioning them to create maximum noise and confusion rather than harm. Ready? He asked, meeting Olivia's gaze one last time. She nodded, her eyes reflecting the same mixture of fear and determination he felt. Ready. Tom lit the fuses and ducked back inside. Seconds later, a series of explosions rocked the clearing, sending their attackers diving for cover amid shouts of confusion. Now, Tom shouted. They burst from the back door, mounting their horses in one fluid motion. As planned, they split up, Olivia riding west while Tom headed south, drawing the attention of their pursuers. Several men gave chase, exactly as Tom had hoped. What he hadn't anticipated was Judge Westfield himself appearing in his path, rifle raised. Stop right there, Cowboy, Westfield commanded. Where's the girl and my documents? Tom reined in his horse, calculating his options. Gone, far beyond your reach by now. Westfield's face contorted with rage. You fool. Do you have any idea who I am, what I can do to you? A corrupt judge who blackmailed and murdered to cover his crimes, Tom replied evenly, and soon everyone will know it. With a roar of fury, Westfield fired, his shot going wild as Tom spurred his horse forward. They collided, both men tumbling to the ground in a tangle of limbs. Despite his judicial robes and Denver manners, Westfield fought with the desperation of a cornered animal, landing several solid blows before Tom managed to gain the upper hand. It's over, Tom panted, pinning the older man to the ground. Lawson kept records of everything, the fraud, the blackmail, even your order to have him killed when he demanded more money. You understand nothing, Westfield spat. We brought civilization to this territory. We built something from nothing. The ends justified the means. Tell that to the families you destroyed, Tom replied, thinking of Olivia's father driven to suicide, of homesteaders forced from land they had worked with their own hands. The sound of approaching horses interrupted them. Tom tensed, preparing for more of Westfield's men, but instead found himself facing a posse from Silver Creek, led by Martin Weber from the saloon. Thomas Eldridge, Weber called, dismounting cautiously. What in blazes is happening here? Tom maintained his hold on Westfield. This man is wanted for murder, fraud, and corruption. He's been posing as the new sheriff to cover his crimes. That's preposterous, Westfield blustered. I'm Judge Gerald Westfield of the Denver Circuit. This man is a common thief who stole valuable documents from me. Weber's eyes narrowed. Funny thing about that, Stage came in after you left town yesterday. Brought a telegram from the territorial governor. Seems the real new sheriff was delayed and won't arrive until next week. So who exactly are you supposed to be? The truth dawned on Westfield's face as he realized his deception had unraveled. With a sudden, desperate move, he reached for a hidden derringer in his boot. Tom knocked it away, but not before it discharged, the bullet grazing Weber's leg. The attempted shooting was all the proof the posse needed. They took Westfield into custody, along with Deputy Harrison and the other men who had attacked the cabin. Tom explained what they had discovered about the land fraud scheme, directing Weber to Olivia and the documents she carried as evidence. The governor will want to see those papers, Weber said, binding his wounded leg, and hear both your testimonies. Tom nodded, already turning toward his horse. I need to find Miss Kincaid. Make sure she made it safely. Weber's eyebrows rose knowingly. Never thought I'd see the day Thomas Eldridge worried about anyone but himself. She must be something special. She is, Tom replied simply, mounting his horse. He found Olivia several miles west, waiting anxiously in a sheltered grove. The relief on her face when she saw him approach made his heart swell in a way he had nearly forgotten was possible. You're alive, she breathed, dismounting to meet him, when I heard more shots. Tom swung down from his horse, crossing the distance between them in 2 strides. Without words, he pulled her into his arms, holding her as if he might never let go. She clung to him just as tightly, her face pressed against his chest. "It's over," he murmured into her hair. "Westfield's been arrested. Weber and a posse from town took him and the others into custody." Olivia looked up at him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Then we succeeded. The documents are safe." "They're safe and so are you." Tom brushed a strand of hair from her face, his touch gentle. "The governor will want to see those papers and hear our account of what happened." Olivia nodded, but hesitation flickered across her features. "And after that, will you return to your life at the Diamond Cross?" The question hung between them, laden with meaning. Tom considered what awaited him there, the solitary existence he had deliberately constructed, the emotional walls he had built to protect himself from loss and disappointment. Then he looked at Olivia, whose courage and determination had reminded him of the man he used to be, the man he could be again. "No," he said finally, "I don't think I can go back to that life, not now." Hope brightened her eyes. "Then what will you do?" Tom's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining naturally. "I'm not entirely sure, but I have a promise to keep to find you in Denver." "And if I asked you to stay?" Olivia's voice was soft but steady, her gaze unwavering. "If I told you that in 2 days, you've made me feel more alive than I have in years?" Tom's heart pounded as the truth he had been avoiding crystallized before him. For 3 years he had convinced himself that survival meant isolation, that caring for others was a weakness the frontier would exploit. But standing here with Olivia, he understood what true strength was, the courage to open oneself to possibility, to risk heartbreak for the chance at something meaningful. "Then I would stay," he answered simply, "for as long as you wanted me to." The smile that illuminated her face was worth every risk he had taken, every belief he had questioned. As he lowered his head to kiss her, properly this time, with all the tenderness and promise their first desperate kiss had lacked, Tom felt the final walls around his heart crumble away. 3 months later, the newly appointed sheriff of Silver Creek signed the last of the day's reports and locked his office for the evening. The town had changed significantly since the Westfield scandal broke. Many of the corrupted officials had been removed and replaced, land stolen from homesteaders was being returned, and a new sense of justice prevailed. Thomas Eldridge had surprised everyone, including himself, by accepting the governor's appointment as sheriff. His role in uncovering the land fraud scheme had earned him respect throughout the territory, but it was his growing sense of responsibility to the community that led him to accept the badge. He walked the short distance to the modest house he now shared with his wife of 2 months. Olivia Kincaid Eldridge had chosen to remain in Silver Creek rather than return to Denver, using her inheritance to establish a small school for the town's children. Her intelligence and compassion had quickly made her a beloved figure in the community. As Tom approached their home, he saw Olivia on the porch, reading in the last light of day. She looked up at his footsteps, her face breaking into the smile that still made his heart race. "How was your day, Sheriff Eldridge?" she asked as he climbed the steps to join her. "Better now," he replied, leaning down to kiss her softly. Inside their home, in a place of honor above the fireplace, hung Olivia's portrait, the painting that had set their extraordinary journey in motion. Beside it was a new addition. A photograph of them on their wedding day, surrounded by the people of Silver Creek who had become their extended family. Tom had once believed the frontier was no place for love, that survival meant standing alone against the harsh realities of the West. Olivia had shown him a different truth, that true strength came from connection, from building something meaningful together despite the challenges life presented. As they sat together on the porch, watching the sun set over the mountains, Tom reflected on how completely his understanding of survival had changed. It wasn't about existing in isolation, protecting oneself from potential pain. It was about finding someone worth facing the frontier with, someone who made every struggle worthwhile. "What are you thinking about?" Olivia asked, her head resting comfortably against his shoulder. Tom smiled, his arm tightening around her. "Just that I'm grateful a stubborn young woman from Denver came looking for a sheriff she'd never met." "And I'm grateful a reluctant cowboy found my portrait," she replied, turning her face up to his. "And decided some troubles were worth sharing." As darkness settled over Silver Creek, Thomas Eldridge held his wife close, marveling at how finding love in the wild frontier hadn't weakened him as he once feared, it had made him whole.